On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss a movie whose main character is a detective in a flashy outfit. His personal life is troubled and he has difficulty connecting with others. The villain is a little crazy and takes full control of the city's criminal organizations. The villain also kidnaps the hero's girlfriend and eventually falls to his death. And all of this is set to a score written by Danny Elfman. Wait, didn't we already do Batman? On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Dick Tracy.
Nice.
Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me in the co-host chair today, I got a duo of them. First off, from the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast, please welcome Tim Williams.
Just call me Kid.
I'd rather not. And also, all the way from the frozen tundra, please welcome Chad Smith.
We're going to break this down, see?
Alright, so we are talking about the 1999 classic?
1990.
Dick Tracy.
1990.
1990. What did I say?
99.
99.
Oh, 99. Okay, I'm sorry. 1990 classic Dick Tracy, and again, classic with a question mark. And we'll get into all of that. We are all of the age where this was probably a pivotal movie for us, kind of the way Batman was the year before in '89. So let's start with that. So Tim, what was your experience with this movie? Like, did you know he was a comic book character?
I mean, I'd seen the comic strips in the newspaper. I mean, I was avid in the comics section of your especially Sunday newspaper more during the week. So I'm pretty sure there were still some of those comics around that I probably saw. So I did know the character somewhat, but I was of course pulled in by the huge marketing campaign, which of course they patterned after 1989's Batman with a lot of the logo and that type of marketing for the merchandising, which was huge. And so that I was sucked in just by the marketing. I can't really say I was a big Warren Beatty fan, but of course Madonna was still one of the biggest pop stars of the time. So, and she had songs in it, and you knew she was going to sing in it, so that was going to be a draw as well.
And just to go ahead and throw this trivia out, she made an entire album that was just inspired by this movie,
and I had
which the song
Vogue
came from.
Yep.
Arguably her most famous song.
Yeah, I had the CD. I did.
Yeah. How about you, Chad?
Oh man, I think me and you actually talked about this on a previous podcast about trying to remember which came first, Batman or Dick Tracy, and my childhood is colored in yellow and black. I feel like it's just like, I don't know what to tell you. They both were huge. And, we're definitely going to get into it, but this was marketed as like a children's movie. This is a Disney movie. And man,
Touchstone.
Eventually it became Touchstone.
But it was very much a Disney.
When Disney doesn't really want their name on it,
right?
Touchstone Pictures.
Very much marketed to kids, and I think this was a very classic, like 80s, early 90s, of where my parents rented this movie, having never seen it before, and left us with pizza and a babysitter, and I watched this at like 9 years old. And so, but anyways.
Well, I mean, Ruby watched it while I was watching it, although she was on her Kindle the entire time, so I don't know how much she actually did watch, but... and she's 9.
Yeah.
So,
That's
and
awesome.
I mean, when this movie came out, I was 9.
Yep.
I don't think I saw this in theaters. I think like you, I saw it once it came out on to rent from Blockbuster. But I loved it.
Yeah.
I wanted the toys. The really oddly shaped toys. Oh yeah,
dude, everybody wanted
that
the
was
watch.
the coolest.
Who didn't want the watch?
I want the watch now. What are you talking about?
Well, we have the watches now.
Apple Watch.
They're called Apple Watches.
Yeah, exactly.
But wanted the watch. Me and Blake talked about this back at Halloween. I dressed as Dick Tracy for Halloween that year. And yeah, one of the toys, I only ever got one. I got Prune Face. That was the one and only toy that I got.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But they were so oddly shaped toys because they were manufactured by the same company that was doing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so they had it like the same body mold of just that stocky, bow-legged.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. And then the Dick Tracy toy didn't even have a jacket. He had the yellow hat, and then he just had his he just had his black vest, the red and black striped tie. Yep, no jacket on the toy. Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
All right, so let's get into where this all came from. So for those of you who weren't aware that it was a comic strip, this movie is based on characters, not a story, but characters. And there couldn't be any more emphasis on the S at the end of that word. Characters created by Chester Gould, who wrote and drew the Dick Tracy comic from 1931 all the way until 1977.
Wow.
Yeah. The movie was released June 15th, 1990, which means I had just turned 9. It not only stars, but is produced and directed by Warren Beatty. His follow-up to Ishtar.
Yeah. His Oscar-winning directorial Ishtar. Yeah. So
yeah, we can call it that. We wouldn't be right, but we can call it that.
I'm just saying, like,
I saw that movie once.
Yeah, I think I've seen it once.
Oh man. So it's one of those weird things, like, I don't think this movie gets made had he not just won an Oscar on this.
I don't think this movie gets made if Batman had not just come out.
Yeah. Well,
it was already being made.
Well,
it had been.
I mean,
it was in production a long time. Yeah,
and they had started in the early '80s trying to make it.
Right.
Martin Scorsese was part of it.
I love that.
Martin Scorsese. It's so
the
crazy.
guy who hates comic book movies.
Right.
Was almost the director of this one.
Well, it would have been cinema had he made it. So
right.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But and then John Landis was the scheduled director, and then a little thing called the Twilight Zone movie happened.
Yeah, little helicopter incident.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
But
maybe we don't.
But honestly, this movie would not have been made unless he was one of the producers, because he had to use some of his own money, because they said if this movie goes over budget, it's coming out of your salary. So he had to put his own money into it.
Oh,
well, he bought the rights.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's so much about that.
Yeah, he got the rights from Tribune Media,
right?
In '85.
Yeah.
And this was definitely a passion project. I love though how you almost want to think, well, why didn't he write it? Well, apparently he did, and his script sucked.
Yeah. So, it seems like a lot of the scripts made for this did not turn out well because they kept getting rewritten.
Well,
they got rewritten like several times.
It goes with basically the original at the end. Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's go back to the comic. We're jumping like way.
Yeah,
it's
going to be that kind of episode.
It's going to be one of those.
Oh man!
But
just like the movie.
Very uneven. Very uneven.
No, just to get into a little bit more about the movie. So we were talking about the writing. Ultimately, the script is credited to Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr., who wrote Top Gun.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
I don't see any connection between these at all. I don't know why Disney or whoever would go, you know what? I think the guys who wrote Top Gun could do this. I don't see it, but okay. Then, of course, we've got the score by Danny Elfman, straight off of his success from Batman, and you can definitely tell he was in a mood at this time.
Oh, so much of it is pretty stinking close.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like you get some of the notes, like da da, and then it changes.
The Pan City shots are for sure.
Right,
it's like the same stuff he used for Gotham.
Even the scenes kind of once again jumping all over the place, but even at the end, like when Dick Tracy falls through the glass into the room where Tess is, and I'm like, this is the exact same music and scene of Batman coming through the
skylight in the
skylight.
art
So
gallery.
I was like, I'm having deja vu, like serious with the music and the shots and everything. So
yeah, a lot of similarities with Batman. And then me being the big theater guy, impressed that 5 songs, original songs written by Stephen Sondheim.
Yes.
One of them even winning the Oscar.
Yeah.
For Best Original.
Yeah. So
One of 3 Oscars this movie won.
Yeah.
Believe it or
yes,
not.
yes, and I mean, we were just kind of talking about the look of it. I mean, that was, and we'll get into all of that. That's going to be a lot of my moving panels part because when we talk about the characters, that's going to be the comic book connection.
Yeah.
There's no comic book connection with the story.
Right.
Well,
So
I'll argue that in a minute. Yeah.
there's not a strong comic book connection with the story.
Well,
Let's
no.
get into that. Okay.
I'll get my popcorn ready.
Maybe you've done a little bit more than I have, but we'll get into that. So before we get into it, though, I want to talk about other comic strip movies. Now, we had the Addams Family television show in the 60s, probably the most successful, taking a comic strip, even though the Addams Family comics were like one-panel comics out of the New Yorker. But you had that. Then we got Flash Gordon in 80.
Mm-hmm.
You got Popeye in 80. Robert Altman. Like, who in the world would have thought that would be a thing?
A musical version of Popeye.
Who would think Warren Beatty would be a huge Dick Tracy fan?
Yeah,
I mean,
you got Annie in 82.
Mm-hmm.
One that we have recently discovered, Jane and the Lost City in 87.
Right.
Based off of a UK comic strip. One that Bethany and I have talked about, Brenda Starr, which made in 89, but it wasn't released until 92. You've got the one, so now we're after Dick Tracy. You got one that Chad and I have talked about, The Rocketeer in 91. You got Dennis the Menace in 93.
Nice.
The Phantom in 96. Then we get into the 2000s, Garfield in 04.
Yeah.
So
and again, I'm only talking live action here.
Right.
And then Marmaduke in
Owen Wilson.
2010.
That's funny. So The Shadow was never a strip, or
I don't think I think it was just a radio show.
Yeah.
I don't think it was
right,
ever a
radio
strip.
show. Yeah,
I
it was
had
like
the
the
same
Spirit
thought there for a
right,
second. Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
I think it may have got turned into a comic, but after the fact.
Yeah.
But no, I think it was originally just a radio. So I bring all those up to ask this. Have they ever been successful with turning a comic book strip into a movie? Other than the Addams Family? Because I will say the Addams Family has been successful.
I would argue that Annie was pretty successful.
But was it successful because it was a movie, or was it successful because it was a Broadway musical that then got turned into a movie?
I mean, that's hard to
because
argue.
really the movie is
But then you could argue the same thing with Addams Family was because Addams Family being a TV show off of the comic strip and then becoming the movies that it's had since then. So
yeah, but I mean those movies, same argument.
Mm-hmm.
So then the rest of them.
So what we're saying is you need an intermediary.
Before
but the thing is, going to film.
But I mean, you could still argue a lot. Popeye had a cartoon.
Right. But
Jane and the Lost City had Jane, the character Jane, had a TV show, BBC TV show, back in like the 50s. Brenda Starr, I think there was a movie serial back in the 40s or 50s. The Rocketeer wouldn't have had anything. Dennis the Menace had a cartoon. The Phantom had a cartoon. Garfield, of course, very famously had a cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon.
Right.
I don't think Marmaduke had anything before. So we're really looking at the Rocketeer and Marmaduke really being the only two that didn't have something before. Because even Flash Gordon had stuff before.
Right.
Yeah.
I said, did Dick Tracy have a radio show?
Yes. So there was a radio show.
Yeah.
There was also a movie. There was a Dick Tracy movie back in like the 40s or 50s.
Okay.
There was a TV show that ran from 50 to 51. Then there was a cartoon that was produced for
in the 60s.
60 and 61.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it is the most jumbled history. So it was a comic strip, and then it just went into some comic books as the strip, And then in 37, he gets his own solo. And then in 39, he first got his own actual run. And the run lasts a long time. It runs until like the mid 60s. It's a really long run on its own. And all of it is so very strange. And oh man.
No, there's one case of that I actually have in my notes to talk about a little bit later, of where they started a story and then restarted a story the very next issue. But so let's go ahead and get into the characters. This is really going to be the moving panels portion, at least in my opinion, just because Beatty or whoever decided, they pretty much pulled everyone out of the comics.
Oh yeah.
To put them into this movie. So we start things off with, of course, Dick Tracy himself, Detective Richard Tracy. I think his should be his proper name. Played obviously by Warren Beatty. The character first appeared in the Detroit Mirror on October 4th, 1931. Chester Gould did base the character off of Elliot Ness, who some of you will know as Kevin Costner's character from The Untouchables. This is what I'm going to get into a little bit later. They do give him an origin later in the comics, in which he joined the police after Tess's father is murdered by Big Boy's gang.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's what they give him there. I'm just going to run through the list here and kind of in groups, and then we can talk. You got Tess Trueheart, played by Glenn Headley, who I always think of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels when I see her.
Yeah.
That character first appeared in the Dick Tracy comic October 12th, 1931. In the comic, kind of like in this movie, she's Tracy's girlfriend and eventually his wife, and then actually has the name Tess Tracy. Then you got the kid, who is Junior in the comics, which then makes sense at the end of the movie when he's Dick Tracy Jr. Junior in the comics, played by Peter Pan's son, Charlie Corsmo.
Nice. You knew I'd seen that kid somewhere before.
Yeah, that was it. That character first appeared September 8th, 1932. Then you've got his Dick Tracy's cop buddies, Pat Patton, played by James Keane. That character first appeared December 1st, 1931. And Sam Catchem, played by Seymour Castle. That character appeared December 26, 1948. And then you got Chief Brandon, played by Charles Durning, being Charles Durning.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, who first appeared October 4th, 1931. So realize what I've done here. That's all the good guys.
Yeah.
So with the exception of Sam Catchem, all of these characters are from the first couple of years of the Tracy comic, which were in the 30s. This movie is, I'm pretty clear, I can't remember if they said, but it's set in the 40s. So any of those y'all want to talk about? I know we're going to kind of talk about Warren Beatty throughout, but anything else you want to hit? Did anybody else think the kid was as annoying as I did?
Yeah.
Very much so.
I just, from the comics, I want to point out something that today would not fly at all. Dick Tracy, like his quote-unquote superpowers, whatever you want to call it, he's America's most decorated police officer and has killed the most perpetrators. Like, it's in print. You're like, oh, man. Like, this is definitely of a time, you know? Mm-hmm. It's wild.
Well, that was the thing about a lot of the comic strips of those times. It was, of the quote-unquote realistic ones, you know, that was just what he was. He was just a detective, a cop who was really good at what he did. Although when you read the comics, kind of like they show a little bit of in this movie, as much as he likes to defend and enforce the law, he doesn't really like to follow it.
Yes, yes, very evident. Very
for
evident.
A cop.
It's along the same lines. It's really interesting that it's the first comic strip that is not comedic. It is violent and serious. It actually takes a lot of flack in the 30s about being, too violent. This shouldn't be in the papers for kids to read, all that kind of stuff. But it's the first time that something wasn't just let's get a 12-panel joke together, basically.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting in that sense.
It's definitely very violent. I read a few to prepare for this, and I'll talk more about that later. I mean, there's one panel where you just watch a guy get shot in the head. I mean, they obviously it's a static panel, but they have the gun, they have the guy's head, and you've got the lines indicating that the bullet just went straight through his head.
Well, and the villains, which I'm sure we're going to get into in the next moving panel segment, are literally like his rogues gallery is called the Grotesques.
Yes,
and it's an apt name. Like they didn't pull it out of thin air. It's very strange. I don't know what Gould's deal was with drawing disfigured villains, but man, he really he wanted to show you that it made you ugly to be a mobster. I don't know what the deal was.
No, let's talk about that. I did read that it's not that they were disfigured and so they become villains. It was the implication that being bad, it was him putting that
they were like physically
evilness
noted as evil.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
It was physically creating them as evil, which I love in the movie when the cops come to get Lips.
Oh, man,
that one cop, I'm going, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
He's a bad guy.
You're like,
He's got prosthetics on.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a bad
Why
guy.
did Pruneface become a cop? Like, it was like,
At least it wasn't Littleface.
that was his other obsession. Half of the villain's face is in the name. You're like, there's Tiny Face and
Tiny
No
Face,
Face and
right.
Matt Rat Face, and it was like, dude, what is your obsession with faces, man?
Just a couple of random characters that I wanted to pop up, especially since we're talking about prosthetics. So first, Steve the Tramp. So Steve the Tramp, who's the one who has the kid, and he's from the comics. Appeared September 9th, 1932. In this movie, he's played by Tom Epper in his little part. But when he turns around, that is a face.
Yeah, pretty terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So we also have in a Blink and You'll Miss It cameo, we've got Kathy Bates as the stenographer.
Yep.
Oh, that was her.
Wow!
I didn't.
When they're
Keep
interviewing
up with Dustin Hoffman's Mumbles.
Yeah.
Yes.
When they're interviewing Mumbles, she's there in the corner. Kathy Bates playing Miss Green. There is a Miss Green in the comic, but there is no connection because the Miss Green in the comics is a storyline in which she rents, and I'm putting quotes around that, she rents her child to this couple so that they can blackmail this dude for money.
As one does.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So throwing that out. But let's get into the villains, and we'll start off with the ones that are one and done at the beginning. The guys playing cards.
Right.
You got The Brow, who debuted June 13th, 1944 in the comic. And here's something that I put into all of these just to go and let y'all know. I also got how they died in the comics.
Nice.
So again,
Seems
The Brow
appropriate.
debuted June 13th, 1944. I did read this story in the comic. His character died September 24th, 1944. So he was only a summer character. And the way he dies is he falls out of I'm not going to get into the big details, but he falls out of a window and is impaled by a flagpole.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
So talking about that violence there. He's also a Nazi. That's something
In the
that
comics.
pops up. In the comics. That's something that pops up a lot
Yeah.
with some of these characters in the comics. But yeah, he was a Nazi. I did find this trivia fact, but I couldn't catch it in the movie. Apparently, if you actually follow them talking about their cards, apparently he is holding the dead man's hand.
I didn't know
Pairs
that.
of aces and eights. Then you have Rodent. He's the one that picks up the cat and throws the cat. Played by Neil Summers. Character
Hold on a
debuted
second. You had to tell us which character that was. So the dude with the rat face was Rodent? Okay. Gotcha.
They're in the movie for such short amount of time.
Not a rat-like face. He doesn't have like buck teeth and a big nose.
Elongated
He has a
nose.
snout.
His
and
elongated
beady eyes.
face.
Like
Yeah. But the character debuted May 25th, 1959. The character then died August 30th, 1959, another summer villain.
Mm-hmm.
And he was burned to death in his car while it was being dragged by a train. Again, this is in the funnies.
Right.
Then you got a villain titled Shoulders, played by Stig Eldred in the comic, who I think's a stuntman. Like that's all he's been known for. A lot of these guys were. And the character debuted June 14th, 1946, and then died February 22nd, 1948. So he lasted a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
He is killed as he's on top of a ladder about to shoot Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy kicks the ladder and he accidentally shoots himself in the head.
Gun safety. It's important.
There you go.
Right.
Then we have Littleface, who actually has a real name. In the comics, you find out his name is Leonard Finney, but he is known as Littleface. This design was a little bit more exaggerated.
Yes, it was.
Than it is in the comic.
In the comics, it's a normal size head with just like a little face on it.
He's just a lot of forehead.
Yeah. But in the movie, he's the Blob with like a regular sized human face. Yeah. It is super bizarre. And a side note on that one, Gould was obsessed with that particular idea because he makes another character called No Face, who has an even tinier face.
Oh, yeah.
In the comics, a really, really little face on like a regular size head. It's very strange to look at.
But Littleface is played by Lawrence Stephen Meyer. The character debuted July 26, 1941, and I found no record of his death. Then we've got Stooge Viller, played by Jim Wilkie. Character debuted in January 4th, 1933, and his character died January 7th, 1940, so a good 7 years for this character. And he dies of gangrene. Yeah. So there. What were y'all thoughts of having these characters where we're just introduced to them and then they're just mowed down right at the very beginning?
I like a beginning that just kicks you right into gear. So
yeah. I mean, it was obvious, especially now, older and more of these movies where I guess at that time you want to call it fan service, but for lovers of the comic, it's just like it's great for them to see those characters, even if it's just for that brief moment.
So for Warren Beatty.
Yes,
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Again, I just keep picturing Littleface because the other thing they did was they made sure made sure that camera was close up every time they went to him. Yes. Like there nothing else in the shot but his head.
Nothing else could fit in the shot but his head.
He had to be written out because that actor would have died of heat stroke if he had to be put in that suit on day 2. Good Lord.
Right.
Then I've got another group to talk about. So after Big Boy takes control, he has a meeting with the other gang leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are several gang leaders who are present, most of which say absolutely nothing. Mm-hmm. So first off, you've got the one who just does speak, Spud Speldoni, played by James Caan, who in the comics is the attorney for the criminals. So he's the one that always defends the criminals. He debuted in the comics November 10th, 1933. He then died May 6th, 1934 in a shootout, like most of the ones in this movie die. So he gets a much grander death in this one with the explosion. Mm-hmm. And now I want to talk about this. You think James Caan said, "I ain't wearing no prosthetics"?
Yeah.
He also has 2 very short lines and is exploded.
Yes.
James Caan.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is post The Godfather.
Yes.
It's not like James Caan is a nobody at this point in time. This movie is bonkers.
It is. Yeah, the people that Warren, which is why I wanted to talk so much about the actors. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The people that Warren Beatty got in this movie.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But you also see, but I'm saying, for that, even that scene, I was like, he's pulled together actors who are known for being bad. All the bad guys typically are known for being bad guys. Maybe not Dustin Hoffman, but he's not completely bad. But you had Paul Sorvino, you had James Caan, you had Henry Silva. Those are 3 that come to mind immediately that I recognized.
I'm not trying to beat you up, Laramy, but I think chronologically, the meeting you're talking about happens after Lips is killed.
Yes, but I just want
so Paul Sorvino also just in this movie for 37 seconds and
just to slobber down,
just to slurp up some oysters. But also sitting
and leer at Madonna.
So. Right.
But also sitting at this table, you've got the comic book character John Ram, who they even say by name because they're telling Tracy all the people that are there. That character appeared April 7th, 1938. I could not find him in the credits. I can picture him. I can see him sitting at the table based off of the look from the character. Don't know who played him, though. Then you've got Ribs Mako, also from the comics, October 27th, 1931. He's played by Robert Beecher. And then, she does not say a word. Texie Garcia, from the comics, October 29th, 1931, being played by Catherine O'Hara. And she's just sitting there.
Yeah. Wow.
Never says a word.
Just Warren Beatty's friend who came over for the day and...
Get a phone call from Beatty. How do you feel about prosthetics? Can you be here tomorrow at 4
She didn't have any prosthetics. She's got some heavy makeup, but she's got the black hat. She's the only woman sitting in the room.
Yeah.
She's got the little like veil over her face, but you look like that's Catherine O'Hara.
Yeah. And you wonder, was she just like on the lot for something you know, going on or whatever? And Warren Beatty was like, yeah, let's do this. I mean, this movie is so bananas.
Because she had done Beetlejuice, obviously, already by this point. And then Home Alone was coming out right about this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the end of that year.
Yeah, but I'm still just going, why? How did you get there? Like, again, we had talked about Kathy Bates already, who has like maybe a couple of words that she says sitting in a corner.
Yeah.
And now here we have Catherine O'Hara, comedic legend. Catherine O'Hara doesn't say a word in the entire movie.
No. It's so weird.
All right. So now let's get into the villains who actually have some parts. And we'll start with the big one with a Big Boy Caprice, Alfonso Big Boy Caprice, although that's not his name in the comic. His name in the comic is Gabe Famoni. Here we are, played by Al Pacino, who earned an Oscar nomination for this role.
Yeah. And he earned a lot of nominations for this role.
He won a comedic award for this one, yeah.
Yeah, won a few things. It's very strange.
It's very Pacino, though.
Oh, yeah.
This definitely seems like the height of Pacino's cocaine use. And, kind of think Beatty just got him, spooled up and turned him loose, you know?
Yeah. I get so much of a kick out of when he gets the club and he is choreographing Madonna's.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. That is
the scene where it's the girls front. You're seeing them from the front in the burlesque show as they move to the sides, and then it's Pacino at the very back of the line. It's so creepy. It's so weird.
Yeah,
and him repeating every line she's singing and
his little spoken.
Yes.
Yeah. More.
Right.
So weird.
The character of Big Boy debuted in the comics on October 11th, 1931. He died December 24th, 1978. And his character dies from a heart attack. He is considered Tracy's main villain from the comics. So he is the Joker to Tracy's Batman. He is the Lex Luthor to Tracy's Superman. And if it got to a point where once they established that he was the main villain, if he wasn't the villain of the story, which is kind of where this movie gets some of its idea, if he wasn't the actual villain, he was the guy behind the actual villain.
Pulling the
he was the
strings,
mastermind. He was the big boss.
The big boss, right.
Big boy. I mean, that's pretty much what it comes from.
Very literal.
And of course, just like we talked about, Dick Tracy is based off of Elliot Ness. Apparently, Chester Gould based Big Boy off of Al Capone.
Makes sense.
Which we see a lot of that. I was actually talking with Bethany as we were watching it about how he gets so freaked out when the Blank and 88 Keys sets him up for kidnapping Tess. and he's freaking out, oh, this is a federal crime, She was like, oh, so now you're worried about committing a federal crime. I said, no, he's worried because there's proof. Whereas all of his other crimes, there was nothing that connected him or he had a way out. And that's the Al Capone connection. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Pre-Rico.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We got Breathless Mahoney, a.k.a. The Blank. And I will say spoilers. Yeah.
Right.
But let's talk about the fact that they spoiled it with the toy release.
Yes, I remember
this
that.
This is another one that
the
toy, just like they did for the Batman Mask of the Phantasm, where the toy actually spoils the big reveal. So even though the Blank character was created for the movie, Breathless Mahoney is from the comic. She debuted May 11th, 1945. She was then killed August 26, 1946 from an unnamed disease that she picked up while she was in prison.
Well, all right.
So in the comic, Breathless is the daughter of another Tracy villain who had recently been killed, and then she wants her revenge on Tracy. And her character in the comic, and again, this is Breathless. She didn't have this alternate persona to be a villain. She was very violent in the comic strip. So this is a very tamed version of Breathless.
Yeah.
Because even as the Blank, like, she's a little hesitant about, doing some of the stuff that I think she only kills, 2 people? Because she's the one that
It's
saves.
really hard to keep up with the body count. In this movie.
Yeah. Because she's the one that saves Tracy when his gun jams, because Tracy, as smart as he is, doesn't realize, hey, you know what? Cement covering
stops firearms.
Right.
Which, okay, that scene for a second. Clean Dick Tracy, camera turns around, camera goes back, and he's the Sandman.
Yeah.
Like, he's, it's like, dude, what? Did you just decide to bathe in it in the 3 seconds we panned from you? Like, what is happening?
And how did he get, because I forgot which one it was, how did he get the other dude out so fast?
Yeah. It was very strange.
Yeah.
But okay.
So
movie magic.
So let's talk about Madonna. Pop icon. This is right at the, probably one of
kind of the height.
The height of her stardom. And, she had toyed around and would continue to toy around with doing movies. So, sometimes she's an actor. What were your thoughts on her acting ability in this? Because I read a lot that said this is probably her best job.
Man, I don't know. It's inconsistent because some parts of the movie, she's the most believable character. Like toward the end, where she's the spurned lover and she has to make the choice that, like, she can't actually actively go against Dick Tracy. You kind of see the wheels turning and the anguish and all that kind of stuff. She's very, very good. Early in the movie, there's a lot of just half second off on delivery. Yeah. Like, it's just not quite right.
Yeah. Some of her delivery is just
Yeah. I would say, like, much like, and she didn't have the greatest movie career in the 80s, but if you want to have some titles, Who's That Girl and Desperately Seeking Susan, which were Shanghai Surprise, let's not forget about that one with her husband at the time, Sean Penn.
I don't even know that one, so I have.
Yeah. She tends to play herself, which the beginning of this movie is like, I mean, I didn't go in this movie like, oh, this is Breathless Mahoney. Like that, I'm watching Madonna be Madonna pretty much for the first part of this movie. Like you said, once it got towards the end, it's like, okay, I'm starting to see a little bit more of a real character there, but I didn't really see her as, she was just Madonna on screen because she was the persona that the pop star Madonna kind of is.
Yeah. And I would say even other scenes that aren't, like the super famous racy scene where she's in Dick Tracy's apartment throwing herself at him.
Right.
Don't you want to frisk me?
She's currently dating Warren Beatty in real life.
While they were filming,
that's not made
but
up.
Not when the movie came out.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's not made up chemistry is my point.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, so even that was like kind of real life, not necessarily,
And your point of that, because going back to we were back talking about the initial cast, but there was zero chemistry between him and Tess. in my mind. Like, there was no romantic chemistry between them, to me, at all in the movie.
Well,
and honestly, I we haven't talked about Warren Beatty. He doesn't really give a lot of his performance
that's
anyway.
what I was
so
about
it's,
to say.
there's a
I
little
think
bit
that's some
more
of Warren
with
Beatty.
Madonna, but not much. Yeah.
Yeah. So bizarre.
And we'll get into definitely more of that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and move on to the characters. I wanted to put this one first because he was my favorite. Mumbles.
Yes.
Mumbles, played by
Dustin
Dustin Hoffman. Yes.
Academy Award winner Dustin Hoffman.
who agrees to both wear horrible makeup.
Yes.
I mean, no. I mean, like, horrible looking.
Yes.
It was a
Yeah.
It was an incredible makeup job that wins
Right.
an Oscar.
Right.
But looks terrible and like doesn't speak a line clearly through the movie.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was Hoffman or if he had some vocal coach or whatnot. He comes up with, like, you can tell that what he is saying makes sense to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
In multiple viewings, I've come to that thought that he has created his own kind of dialogue or sped up dialogue to make it sound.
Yeah.
Like, I think he worked at that. Like, I don't think he was just mumbling.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he's
He
actually
created his
saying
own little language. Yeah.
dialogue. Yeah, exactly.
So wild.
Yeah.
But the character in the comics is actually part of a band. He's a musician, and it's the Mumbles Band. And he debuted October 16th, 1947. And again, couldn't find anything about his death. So apparently the character survived in the comics. But yeah, that Mumbles is my favorite character. Just hands down, period. Dustin Hoffman is amazing. But you're talking about Dustin Hoffman agreeing to do this. Realize he's also agreeing to do this after doing Ishtar. So I don't know if Warren Beatty went, look, I'm going to make it up to you.
Did he, though?
Trust me. This will be better.
But he's coming off his nomination for Rain Man in '89.
Yeah. And then he would go on to be Captain Hook with the kid.
Yeah, there you
a little
go.
bit later. So then we've got who is almost the actual main villain, and that's Flat Top.
Yes.
In fact, William Forsythe gets third bill in this movie,
Yeah.
which I was so surprised by. It's Warren Beatty, then it's the kid, and then it's Flat Top. And then the opening credits, the way they order the characters, I was so
man.
confused.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
so
Like,
bizarre.
you're not doing it alphabetically. You're not. How are you? You're not doing it by appearance.
right.
Like, how are you doing this?
It was some weird Warren Beatty auteur,
Yes.
like thing that he decided to do. So oh man.
Flat Top, who was a fan favorite from the comics. He is.
He's really kind of the number 2
Yes.
villain.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
like,
for sure.
Big Boy is the dude, but you see Flat Top a lot in the early comics, and I thought they did an amazing job. I would say that the makeup for this character is probably the most true.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
This was cartoon come to life
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, it was really amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say his was, of all of the makeup jobs, his to me was the most convincing of, like, not thinking that's a makeup job. Like, it looked almost like that's really how he looked. So
Yeah. But you say he was in a lot of the comics. The character now there's Flat Top Jones Sr. and then there was a Flat Top Jr. But he is supposedly playing the senior. He debuted December 21st, 1943, and then died May 14th, 1944. So he's only a 6-month, character.
But to your point, he's so popular that his kid then becomes the same character and continues the run.
And then also, I didn't write this down. Flat Top came from a family in which, like, his brothers were like Big Top and Point Top, and like they all had different things. But going to his death in the comics, so he dies by drowning when he's trying to escape the police. He's underwater swimming to get away from them, and then his foot gets caught and he can't get loose and he drowns.
in a kid's
in a
comic
kid
strip
comic. That's
in the
again
40s.
that is why I wanted to put these deaths on here. We then have his second, Itchy, played by Edo Ross, and I don't know why Edo Ross chose the voice he chose. I don't know, but
Okay, in a movie of weird, unbelievable things, that Dick Tracy goes to the door with that terrible
woman voice
impersonation.
Yes.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
In the comics, Itchy actually has a real name, like we mentioned earlier with Littleface. And this is one of those great ones. This is really like one of those Batman villain. His real name in the comic is Itchel Oliver.
Nice.
Yeah. He debuted September 14th, 1945, and then just died a few months later, December 22nd, 1945. And just like in the movie, he's shot by Tracy. We then
He has killed the most bad guys of any cop in America. Point proven.
Yeah.
Right.
We then have a character that was created for the film. I don't know why, because he serves no purpose, and that's Numbers. Big Boy's accountant, played by Mr. Strickland from Back to the Future, James Tolkien.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did recognize him. Yeah, and you're right. He has no.
Yeah,
real
you would
purpose.
think that they were going to do something, with the books,
Yeah, like the Al Capone connection kind of a thing.
But no. And so why do they create a character?
Once again, another bad guy in his crew.
But he's not even an active bad guy. Like,
No, what I'm saying, that he's known
and-
playing. He's known as the actor is known as playing a bad guy.
yeah,
is what I'm
true.
saying.
And the only comic book character that has a larger rogues gallery is Batman. And so why make up a bad guy?
Yeah.
Like ever.
Yeah,
It's ridiculous.
no reason. Then we've got 88 Keys, who I kind of was iffy about. Do I put him as a bad guy? Like, is he a bad guy?
No.
Now, in the comic, Keys is spelled with the second E, Keyes. In the movie, they dropped the second E so that it's literal 88 Keys. Can
I say?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Played here by I have to say, almost unrecognizable Mandy Patinkin, even though he's wearing almost no prosthetics.
No makeup.
He's just
Yeah,
got
exactly.
the kind of the receding hairline. But the character debuted April 15th, 1943. And then he also was shot by Tracy on July 11th, 1943. So just a couple of months he lasted. But what did you want to say about 88 Keys?
So I was gonna say about his name. I love it when they're in the car and it says 88 Keys. The piano player. And I'm like, yeah, that. I think they would figure that out.
I would love how police. I would love to know.
Rodent, the guy with the rat face.
Yeah, that's the thing.
exactly.
I would love to know how police lineups worked in the Dick Tracy comics. Do you recognize
piano player?
the one who stole your car? I think he's the dude with the prune face.
Yeah, so prune
face.
Right.
Oh,
His
man.
name was kind of. I heard his name once. It's something like piano. I don't know. Something about a piano player.
Yeah.
88 Keys.
Oh, yeah.
maybe something like that.
That would be the other thing. Is I heard some guys talking about a robbery. I didn't see any faces though, but I know it involves some dude named Flat Top and a guy named Littleface. But look,
We're never gonna find
Yeah.
those guys. What kind of names are
but
those?
I couldn't identify them, so I'm not going to be able to tell a sketch artist what they look like.
And a mask is not helping those guys.
No.
Like, you just on silhouette, you're like, yep, it was him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, we've talked about him a few times already. So Pruneface, played by R.G. Armstrong. Again, this was the toy I actually owned. This is a pretty good character, I will also say. Like, he plays it really well. The character debuted in the comics October 23rd, 1942. He actually lasted until August 6th, 1999.
Wow.
Yes. And in that comic, he is an old man. His daughter...
You couldn't tell it.
Yeah. His daughter is actually involved in the storyline. And she sets up this deal with Tracy to get her father. And I didn't read the story. I just kind of read a synopsis. But what ends up happening is during the exchange, which is in an air gondola, yeah, because we might talk about this a little bit more. Chad might know more about this than I do. But in the 90s, Dick Tracy started going sci-fi. So
it was way before.
It was before the 90s.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this air gondola was part of that, but he falls from the air gondola, and that is how he dies in the comics. He also, in the comic, was a Nazi. In fact, right before he falls to his death, his final words in the comic is "Sieg Heil."
Wow.
1999.
Yeah.
To the end.
Yeah. So he has a wife who in the comics is Mrs. Pruneface.
Yes.
and she is the only villain of all of these people that has a deformed face because of something happening to her. Apparently when she was a little girl, she had gasoline thrown in her face, and it makes her like an alien face. If you look at the panels that she's in, she looks like like a gray in the alien, like an X-Files culture. It's super bizarre. But she is arguably more evil than her husband. There's so many stories where when Pruneface fails, Mrs. Pruneface tries to then like beat the crap out of Dick Tracy with her purse full of gold bars or whatever. It's the most bizarre character in all comics.
Then we've got Influence, who is never referred to by name. You only know it's Influence because of the credits. Influence, played by Henry Silva. Character appeared in the comic November 28th, 1946. I didn't find a death for him. And then finally, we've already mentioned him, but Lips Manless, played by the late, great Paul Sorvino. The character debuted March 20th, 1936, and I also couldn't find a death for him. So there we go. And then finally, he's not a gangster, but he is a bad guy. District Attorney Fletcher, played by the wonderful Dick Van Dyke.
It's wild.
And that character also created for the movie. Although there were district attorneys in the comic, they created this one especially for the movie. And yeah, Dick Van Dyke in a out of character role for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to say, like, he has since then played kind of the villain a couple of times. Is this Dick Van Dyke's first run as, at the very least, a corrupt character?
I would say yes. I'd have to go to a deeper dive of his filmography. But yeah, I would say yes.
Hot off the heels of Diagnosis Murder.
Oh, wow.
It works so well, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does. He plays a good politician, is what he does.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so weird even just to see Dick Van Dyke like smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that's a thing of the 80s also. So, if we're being honest, it was much more culturally okay. But it is very strange, the like over the shoulder shot, which always looks evil. But and he's just like, puffing on that cigarette, and you're like, this is weird. Like, that's not Dick Van Dyke is not supposed to be doing this. But it works.
And for anyone
so
listening, talking about Chad's remark of it was a little bit more acceptable, it wasn't that we didn't already know that it was bad for you.
Right.
But it was really like at that point, we just didn't care as a society.
Because like other things like helmets, just...
You would go into a restaurant and they would ask you, smoking or non?
Smoking or non-smoking.
Yeah. Because there were two different sections of the restaurant. Not separated by any walls or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, usually the non-smoking section was in the back of the restaurant, so you had to walk through the smoking section to get to the non-smoking section.
Oh man!
And what was really the difference between the sections? Whether you had an ashtray on your table, like that was that was it right there. All right, so always have to ask, and so we're gonna ask you right here with this, 700 different characters in this movie. Who do you want to see again, and who do you wish would take a bath into the river? I'm just going to go ahead and say, I wanted to see D.A. Fletcher some more. Like, I wanted a little bit more of that character. I wanted to see more of that corruption. I wanted to see more of him bending the rules in order for Big Boy to get away. You know, they just have that one little moment where he just walks up to Tracy and says, yeah, we got 14 people saying that he was, elsewhere during that. So sorry. And then he walks away. Like, I wanted to see him do more to help Big Boy. So that's it for me. Definitely want to see more of him. And I kind of already alluded to this. I could have done without the kid. I did not need a montage of him saying, when do we eat, over and over again.
Right.
So there's mine. So
the character I want to see in the bath, as well as the kid. Like, I was the same thing. I think this is where the movie is very uneven. Like, I think he's there for the kids aspect of the movie, which doesn't really fit the rest of the movie. Like, he's just kind of shoehorned in to the movie for me. The character that I want to see more.
Hold on, you say he's there for the kids. Let's not forget about the scene where he oogles over Madonna.
Yeah.
After she leaves Tracy's apartment, and he's just watching her out the window. Hey, next time, why don't you have me interview her? Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but the whole idea of having a kid in the movie, once again, is just your like I hate to say pandering, but you're trying to invite the kids in to have a character they can relate to. And so, the one I would want to see more of, honestly, I would have liked more of Flat Top. And I think just because I think he was I would have liked more of him than Big Boy. I think, Pacino's going to Pacino whatever he's in, but it becomes so outlandish and over the top, it gets annoying after a while, where Flat Top is just, the brute force. So I don't know. I would like to see more of him.
I'm actually, I don't know. I'm going to try to get a little clever here. I want to see more of Dick Tracy.
Okay.
Because you get nothing from him in this movie. I mean, he obviously, it's not one of those like, Indiana Jones things where if he's not in the movie, it still works out the same. He's clearly like a giant force in the movie, but you have no reason to believe in him. There is zero connection to him. Even like you were talking about the chemistry with Tess, I mean, and you're like, why is she with him?
Yes.
Like, he has no redeeming qualities other than he's like, fights bad guys kind of thing. And so it's just, and it's really weird because I read an interview that Warren Beatty even said that while this was his passion project, and like he clearly is in love with Dick Tracy, like he claims that he learned to read, reading Dick Tracy comics, like all this kind of stuff, and is super passionate about the history of it. And even he says that James Cagney should have played this character.
Yeah.
Like, so I kind of wonder, like, did he have a little bit of an inferiority complex? Like, did it affect his performance, and he underplays everything because he doesn't feel like he deserves to play this? One to play it, yeah. And it shows, in my opinion. I just you just don't see much of the guy, which also makes it the character that I want to throw in the river. Like, I just, I got no reason for him. Like, I don't like him past he's the titler guy,
So I will point out, I saw that about James Cagney too. And even when I heard it, or actually read it, but when I read it and he was like, I think James Cagney would be perfect for it. I'm like, wait, James Cagney died in 86 and he was 86. Yeah. When did you want James Cagney to play Dick Tracy? Like,
he wanted this movie made when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Like, clearly.
Yeah.
So I just found that because it in the interview, it sounds like he's talking about the Dick Tracy
that he would have cast.
That he would have cast James Cagney. No, and I'm just going, huh? That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, not to get off on too much of a tangent, but I think today we have forgotten what a weird dude Warren Beatty was. I mean, and this is kind of at the height of his weirdness, or whatever, however you want to word it.
Yeah.
Like, this movie is clearly some weird turning point in his life and his career, all this kind of stuff, because he is like the quintessential playboy. You know, they theorize that like basically the only person who has fathered more illegitimate children is like Wilt Chamberlain, you know, and all this kind of stuff.
Nick Cannon's probably not too far behind here.
But you know, you got all that stuff, and the dude quit acting for like 15 years because he hated a role he was in. Like, he makes Daniel Day-Lewis look like he doesn't care. You know, he's such a weird dude, and the people that he worked with, like, he would only get, you know, the super talented guys to work with. Like, even, I mean, we've been kind of mocking the movie a little bit. I mean, obviously we're like nostalgic and sentimental about it, but this is a beautifully shot movie.
Yes. I would agree.
I mean,
with that.
it's incredible the lengths that they went to make this movie, and the choices they made, the like matte paintings of all the like cityscapes and everything. And have you ever seen asphalt look that good? Every scene, the street is wet and there is some primary color reflecting off it.
Yeah.
It is incredibly shot. And so, you know, it's such a bizarre movie, man.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to an 80s Flick Flashback podcast once in a while, you could miss it. Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes, VCRs, and the video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? My name is Tim Williams. I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. On each episode, I'm joined by guest co-hosts to discuss one of the many movies released in the 1980s. We share our first-time watch memories, our favorite scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. New episodes are released every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an excellent episode of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. The ad is over. Go home. Go.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into talking about this stuff, and this is what we'll put in for the moving panel section. So we were talking about the look. As always, when the look is so big, I love to give credit. So the art direction was done by Richard Salbert, who had done Chinatown. Yeah. So a great connection there. And then he worked with Rick Simpson, who you'll love this, Tim. Rick Simpson, who was the art director for Johnny Dangerously, and Big Trouble in Little China.
There you go.
And then he would also go on, which I wanted to mention this, he would also go on to do Armageddon. And the reason why I want to point out Armageddon is because of the colors. Like, Armageddon was a really, like, the colors really pop in that movie. You know, their orange jumpsuits, the blue and the purples when they're on the asteroid. You know, I know it's got a lot of that Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer kind of parts
Sun
to
flares.
it. The blurred parts. But I went into that thinking kind of the same thing. Then you also got the cinematographer, and I'm going to butcher this name,
Vittorio Storaro.
There you go. Who was the cinematographer for Apocalypse Now?
Yep.
So you've got this, again, Beatty getting these top tier people.
It's an all-star team. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But going into what Chad was talking about, beautiful asphalt, because everything's colored. Everything.
Yes. Yes.
And they only used, I saw conflicting things here. They only used 6 or 7. I couldn't lock down on which was the exact number. I'd read it one place and they would say 6, read another place and they would say 7. They only used 6 or 7 colors, which were the same that they were using in the comic. And I believe it was the cinematographer who said every red is the same red. Every, green is the same green. I wanted to disagree with that a little bit because I'm pretty sure Big Boy is wearing like a teal color when he comes out of the courthouse. Near the beginning, he's being interviewed by all the detectives. His green, I guess you'd call it. It's a little different than the guy standing next to him. But the red, definitely. I mean, there's so many times where
And
like
the yellow.
Yeah.
There's so many times when the kid, who his main color turns out to be red, where he's up against things and he almost could just disappear next to that red. Yeah, but the yellow too. There's the yellow blinds in the cafe that you can see clearly match Tracy's hat and coat. There's even a yellow car that passes him at one point.
I was about to say, there's the scene where he chases the kid out into the street, and there's a yellow building, a yellow car, and Warren Beatty's, and they all like cross at one point of the shot, and it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
But even the way they shot the movie, not just the colors, there's
look like
so
a panel.
little movement. Yeah, there's so little movement in any of the shots. Like, it was all done on purpose.
Yeah, little movement of the camera. The camera does not move.
Right.
Yeah. So that it's just that static shot and frames. What's going on. One of the biggest ones there is when Tracy is sitting at his desk when Breathless then walks in, because the camera does move and shift as Breathless is coming forward. But when they show Tracy, he is perfectly centered in the shot. He's got the two windows behind him, and that is dead on a frame. I mean, even the opening, the color and the shot.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, when you see the set, the matte paintings that go along with the set, but even when they show Tracy open the door and there's the green wall behind him, like it's just a perfectly framed shot, and it just screams, this is a comic book. We're bringing to life a comic book. And I think this was one of the last movies to really use matte paintings. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
And they do it beautifully. These are some gorgeous matte paintings, and the effects work that they do to put the movement into the matte painting is great.
Yeah, and I thought about that a few times. I was like, I wonder how much of, with Who Framed Roger Rabbit being the year before, of blending the animation and the live action together, if that helped them with that.
Since you brought that up, Charles Fleischer in a little cameo, the voice of Roger Rabbit, right? Which there was a Roger Rabbit cartoon that aired before the movie in theaters.
Yeah, because you guys said you didn't. I did see it in theaters, and I do remember seeing the Roger Rabbit short before the movie. So I did, when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember seeing the Roger Rabbit like short before the movie. I thought that was pretty cool.
All right, so we've talked about this. I've got this in my notes to talk about. Let's talk about the movie and who was this movie for? It is based on a character that no one under the age of 50 was really familiar with. It is rated PG, although as Chad and I have both talked about, it's extremely violent. Then there is all the stuff with Madonna that is very strongly sexualized. The innuendos that she throws out.
Yes.
Can you even call that innuendo?
Yeah,
it's blatant.
Yeah, it's pretty blatant.
I sweat better in the dark. That was one.
What's the line leading up to that? That's like a back and forth.
There's a couple of them in there.
And then later on, Al Pacino's character tells her, the whole mink thing. A woman wears mink or shouldn't wear anything, and she's like,
I look good in both.
Yeah. And you're like, geez, dude.
Yeah. She lays it on really thick.
And so one of my favorite quotes that I read from any of the cast when we were researching this is Al Pacino was quoted in saying that in rehearsals, Madonna flashed him because they did it with a coat, and she apparently had on nothing and just flashed Al Pacino as a joke. And Al Pacino said, when I'm an old man and you see me staring off into space with a smile on my face, I'm remembering that moment. I was like, dude.
Well, so let's go into that. When Tracy goes into her dressing room and she comes around from behind that screen.
Partition,
she's nude underneath
Right. Yes.
underneath that robe. That
Listener, what you can't see is the three of us looking at each other on the cameras and our faces just making strange motions, not knowing what to say.
like that is a sheer robe, a
Yes.
see-through robe.
Yes.
And although they do some shadowing and then she carries a couple of things,
Stuff. Yes. Yes.
like she's nude.
And then she makes the line where he's like, "Aren't you grieving?" And she said, "I'm wearing black underwear." And I'm like, "What are you?"
Are you though?
That's the line right before the sweating
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So weird. Kids movie.
So who was this movie for? Because they had the McDonald's tie-in, they had the toys. Everything's bright and colorful. It's Walt Disney Touchstone.
Well, Disney originally it was good. Like Disney had its name on it until almost the very end, and they said no, we're going to give it a Touchstone because of the violence and of the sexual nature of some of the scenes. So that tells you right there that it's. I think it initially was trying to be a kids, quote unquote, more kid friendly movie, but that's why once again I think the kid being in it was the only thing that really tries to make it like, because everything else in that movie, like the whole gunfight at the end and the excessive bullets and first of all, they're completely firing these guns and no one is reloading at any point for 10 minutes.
I mean, Flat Top wastes 700 bullets to write the message to Tracy.
Right, yeah, at the beginning, yeah.
And it made me think of that John Mulaney joke about, anyways, that's a whole other story, but he's like, are bullets free back then? But anyway, so totally different story. But it's very fun. That scene is hilarious to me because it's not 4 minutes before that, Tracy's telling all the cops, don't shoot, she's with him. And then they have a Bonnie and Clyde shootout. Holy crap.
Yeah, and I had that same thought. I'm like,
with
firing
Tracy
at these cars.
standing between
Yes.
the
He's
cops.
probably the first one shooting,
Yes.
He's standing between the cops and the gangsters.
But as the cars are coming out, how does he know which car Tess is in? Because they're just mowing every car
Just
down
start shooting
as soon as they come out.
So,
yeah.
It's so wild.
I will say,
I don't know
though,
who this movie was made for. It was made. I do know it was made for Warren Beatty. We've already established
that is the correct answer. You are correct. You are correct.
It was made for the 10, 12-year-old that we were watching it so that we would have this nostalgia for it 30 years later.
Right.
Oh, dude, I don't know. It's kind of a shame in the sense that there's so much right with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so ridiculously well made. The people in it care.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about with Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman could have blown this off and got a paycheck. And he clearly gave a rip about doing a good job with this. And it's so bizarre to me. And again, I think the weak link is Warren Beatty.
He is.
Yes.
That's the really strange part about this movie to me.
Yes.
Is it's so good except for Dick Tracy.
But part of me wonders if that's not because in the comic, Dick Tracy is a flat character.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like a bold, square-jawed flat character. Yeah. So, and Warren Beatty's not. He's just kind of soft. And he's also, and even though he's flat, you can tell he has motivation. There is a passion for what he does.
I will give him that.
And that's what I was talking about earlier with this Dick Tracy. I don't understand why he does what he does. Why is he a cop? Why does he care what these gangsters do to his city?
Which is, like I said, I was going to bring this in. Something that happened in the comics. So they introduce the character of Big Boy in the comic. And then the very next comic, they go back and tell the origin story. Of Tracy. Yeah. They show how, he was there when Tess's father is murdered by Big Boy's mobsters. And that is why he decides to join the police force and then ultimately becomes, the world's greatest detective, Batman. So
No, he killed more people than Batman, so that's
he's the world's greatest police officer.
Yeah, greatest police
not
officer.
detective.
Yeah, that's true. He is great. Although they try to
so
go ahead.
Let's hit on that for just a second though. They do Gould does flat rip off Batman, and I mean way back when. There's a character in the 40s that is like a straight rip off of Two-Face.
Yeah.
Except he's more graphic. Like, I would actually argue that he's worse than Two-Face. But down to having a suit that is, like, evenly divided into the whole thing. Like, it's so crazy, the stuff that he just straight rips off of Batman. So it's kind of poetic justice that it also rips off Batman 89 in movie form, you know?
I mean, you're talking about the Rose Gallery. I mean, with both Batman and Dick Tracy having such a vast Rose Gallery, you can't help. There's got to be some matchups in that.
Right.
Yeah, and to be fair, like both of them do fight the mob quite a bit. I mean, like Falcone is clearly like a big Batman villain, so there's going to just be some overlap there, but who knows?
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to bring up were some of the plot holes towards the in the finale of the movie. So first off, again, going to that whole, by the book type cop that Dick Tracy's supposed to be, his partners essentially break him out of prison.
Yeah.
They don't go about it in a legal manner. They break him out of prison, which means everything he does from that point on is illegal.
Totally illegal.
And would not hold up in a court of law at all. The room that Tess is in, which is locked by a vault door, has a skylight.
Yeah. I put skylights in all my safe rooms.
Right.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Has a skylight.
Because what I'm hiding needs to see sunlight. I mean, that's it's humanitarian.
Yeah.
So, the creepiest moment of this movie is when Al Pacino's Big Boy is professing his love to Tess
Out of the blue.
Yeah,
bro. Yeah. Where did that come
Bethany
from?
even made that comment. She was like, "Where did that come?"
Creepy, man.
I was like, "I think it's just because he's crazy. Like he's crazy." So yeah, because we don't have in Batman '89 where you've got all the kind of build up of the Joker actually being infatuated with Veronica Vale.
Vicky Vale.
Vicky Vale.
And it's even weirder to me that the entire time Breathless is just an object to him.
Oh yeah.
There's no affection. She's just a tool to so then to be kidnapping Dick Tracy's girlfriend, and through the course apparently of trolleying through a tunnel together, he has fallen in love with her and feels the need to profess his love. It's way weird.
Which brings me to another plot hole. When Tracy goes into the wine cellar and he's trying to find that door,
right?
And then all of a sudden he hears the foghorn.
Yeah.
How does that tell him anything?
I know
he knows where the end of the tunnel
I
is.
know
where
where
they
the
are.
secret room goes to.
Yeah,
I know where.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Not only does he know, the kid and Breathless both end up there.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did they end up there? How did they know?
Apparently the kid just is really good at following Dick Tracy places.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's done that all movie.
Yes.
To be fair,
and Breathless has some of the greatest costume changes I've ever seen.
Yeah,
she's
to
quick.
go from a dress
She's
to
quick.
a full suit and mask and hat. I mean, and gets up some stairs pretty quick too.
Oh, I didn't bring this up when we were talking about the colors. So they're giving away that the blank is Breathless throughout the entire movie. Because every time you see the blank, the color purple is in the scene. And the color purple is only in scenes with Breathless.
Okay.
Yeah. Bethany pointed out that James Caan's character is wearing purple. And then I went, not for long.
But technically, she's also in that scene.
Yeah.
She's just in the corner of the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so weird, man.
I know you're in plot holes, but I wanted to go back to Mandy Patinkin. We kind of briefly talked about him, but I have to talk about, it was great to hear Mandy Patinkin sing in this movie, which is probably one of the highlights for me of this movie is the song that he does
with Madonna
in the movie. Yeah, and
I was about to say he gets to say he did a duet.
Yeah,
with
it was
Madonna.
great until she came in, but that's another story. But anyway, but the subtle, well, I guess somewhat subtle, was that his infatuation with her was the only reason that he was helping her. So that's when you said, was he really a bad guy? I think we had that discussion earlier. I was like, I think he was more kind of caught up in the infatuation and just kind of going along with what she wanted him to do.
But he thinks he's
But
helping
he
the
doesn't
blank.
know.
He doesn't know it's her.
Yeah. He doesn't know that it's her.
Okay.
No, he doesn't know it's her because even after he gives the pitch that the blank gave him to give to Big Boy and Big Boy turns it down, as he's walking out, Breathless even says, what
She
was
makes
that
the
about?
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
you know...
He says something about income taxes
Yeah.
or some smart.
Yeah, I remember that.
remark.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah.
But
no, they definitely... I mean, he does a good job of selling the fact that he has feelings for Breathless in their little subtle moments. I mean, he just pretty much stares at her every time they're in a scene together.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it's just because she's the only person there that's kind to him. Like that's
That's
just
true, too.
That's true.
Yeah.
Just kind of that typical trope.
Yeah.
Speaking of tropes, like we were talking about,
We're gonna start. We're gonna start down a whole rabbit hole on that one.
Getting bizarrely leered over by Al Pacino's character, but like women are not done horribly well in this movie.
No.
And I mean, huge shocker considering Warren Beatty is like a notorious womanizer.
Yes.
But I mean, it is what it is. And so going back to your question from earlier of like, who would you want to see more of? I thought Madonna like grew in her acting ability through the film. Now I'm also kind of assuming that things were filmed in chronological order and we all know that they weren't, but I feel like she had more to give and was arguably one of the strongest characters in the film
In terms of depth.
and
yeah.
and it's kind of thrown away by her like wanton sexuality and just and at the end she just dies because she has a soft spot for the hero. Like
Let's also point out
super
that
great.
she dies because the kid tackles her, and then as she goes to get back up, that had given Big Boy time to
gets
grab the
shot,
gun.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's all the kid's fault.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't feel like she's done justice. Tess, why does she stay with Dick Tracy?
Yes.
I know.
Like
Yes.
even at the end,
He just
Yes.
throws
Like,
the
he
ring
bit-
at her.
Yes.
he kind of sort of proposes.
Yeah.
And she's like, "You're gonna go, aren't you?" And he does.
Yeah.
And yet they're like together. Like, come on, man. Like,
But, he did put in that line about, when she's talking to her mother, it was like, it takes a lot of understanding to love a man like that. What did you say, mother? It takes a lot of understanding to love a man like that. And then she gets up and leaves
Yeah.
and goes back. And I was like, okay.
How does that
that's
like?
yeah, it's not great.
Like even
No.
even with him being who he is, as she's always talking about, like I would have liked better at the end when he's getting a call about a bank robbery, for him to just blow it off. Like y'all
Right.
can handle this one. I've got I've got bigger things to worry about.
Right.
And to have him and Tess and the kid, go out as
Do
a
something
quote
together.
unquote family,
Right,
get into the
right.
car, and then they drive off together instead of it being the kid.
Instead of a kid
Yeah.
leading him towards a
Danger.
bank
Yeah.
robbery. Yeah.
Right.
well, I mean, in the comics, Tracy is always putting Junior in harm's way.
Oh yeah, dude. Like it's
Yeah.
wild.
One of the stories I read, a bellhop had been murdered, and they keep talking about, why would they kill him? He's just a kid. He's just because bellhops were
Yeah.
like teenage
Yeah, yeah.
boys back then. And then Tracy gets this plan of, we're gonna lure the killer out. We need a bellhop. Somebody call Junior, and so they call Junior to be bait.
Because 12-year-olds make great undercover cops. I mean, come on, man. Like,
So, all right. Last thing I want to get in before we get into our final decision, and that is the future of Dick Tracy. So, so here we are, 2023, in which Warren Beatty has brought the character back
yes.
for the third time. I'm going to talk about all three for the third time. So Warren Beatty gets the rights in 85. He makes the movie. After the movie, there was some legal issues with him and the company about whether he'd still retained the rights. He eventually won, but it got so late in, Disney didn't want to do a sequel. There was at one point, I don't know if either one of y'all found this, Bruce Campbell wanted to make it a TV show with Bruce Campbell playing Dick Tracy. And I'm just going, how perfect casting is that?
Square-jawed guy.
Right.
Yeah.
And Warren Beatty wouldn't allow it because he was dead set on he wanted to make a sequel. Which I want to get into the whole sequel in a minute. But continuing on. So then his rights work the same way as like Marvel did back in the 90s and early 2000s, of where they would license it out. And as long as those characters were being used, whoever bought the rights still retained the rights. So that's why we got all the horrible Fantastic Four movies. That's why we had hit and miss with the X-Men movies, so that Fox could maintain those rights. That's why Sony is still holding on to Spider-Man, because they keep doing Spider-Man related stuff. Yeah. So apparently the rights were about to end and he hadn't done anything. So in 2008, Warren Beatty did a AMC special called the Dick Tracy Special.
TMC.
Oh, TMC,
Turner
sorry.
Classic movies.
Yes, right.
So on TCM, where it was just an interview with Leonard Maltin. Dick Tracy, like an hour.
A 30-minute show.
30-minute, yeah.
It was a 30-minute show that aired one time.
Once, yeah.
One time. Did you see who the cinematographer was?
I did, but I can't remember.
Emmanuel Lubezki.
Yeah.
3-time Oscar-winning cinematographer who was the cinematographer for The Revenant, maybe the most beautiful shot movie of all time.
Yes.
Is the cinematographer for
30-minute
two
interview.
people sitting in front of a black background.
It's
this dude. It's crazy.
So then this year, 2023, it happened back in February. I know one of the movie groups that I'm on Facebook just were talking about that this is happening. They did it again. This time it was Ben Mankiewicz. And it was Dick Tracy on a Zoom call with Ben Mankiewicz. And this was the Dick Tracy special, Tracy Zooms In.
Wow.
It's so weird.
And again, this is so that Warren Beatty can hold on to the rights for Dick Tracy. It is 2023. Yeah. Warren Beatty is, 86 years old, I think?
Yeah, he's got to be in his 80s because he was in his early 50s when they made the movie 34 years ago. Yeah. So, I mean...
Yes, yeah. So, he just turned 86. March 30th, 1937 is his birthday. So, he just turned 86. So, 86-year-old Warren Beatty, is he holding on to the rights out of pride? Because he clearly is not going to play Dick Tracy.
Well, we do have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming out this summer. So he's unfortunately he's got some other people that are doing it at his age. But
so what do we see as a sequel though? Because you know what, you're not too far off. Harrison Ford was born in 42, so he is just a few years younger.
Yeah.
But what do we do for a sequel? Because you have used all your characters in the first movie
killed them all
and killed them pretty much all. Unless you will all of a sudden going to have Mumbles be the main protagonist.
Right. Yeah, I mean you have to reboot it at this point. I mean, there's no way it can be a real sequel.
Okay, here's my pitch.
Okay.
So, Laramy, coming full circle on something you brought up earlier about when they went a little sci-fi. So,
are we getting into time travel now?
Dude, Laramy, we were talking before about how much of the strips you managed to read, and you got into like maybe the early 50s?
Yeah, actually, I don't think I made it past the 40s.
So, if you scan forward, it very much, Gould becomes a product of his era, whatever era that is. So in the 70s, you have like bushy mustaches, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, Dick
Well,
Tracy does grow a mustache at one point in the comics.
And it's so weird.
Yeah.
In the 60s, what is like the overarching thing in American culture? The space race.
So there are aliens.
Dick Tracy goes to the moon, at which point, because just in the comics, just like in the movie, he's a little bit of a womanizer. He meets the Moon Maid, and who is clearly a like 60s go-go girl with an alien head. And
Yeah.
and it's a whole like storyline. It's so weird, man. So Dick Tracy goes to the moon. That's the next movie.
And then right here in the 80s, I know there were comics in which he's in flying vehicles. And
So also, to come full circle from the very beginning of our conversation, so there's a little bit of a loophole. This movie is directly based on a comic book because Disney made comic books in the mid 80s that were already written on the script that would eventually be used.
Right.
So there's a 3 comic book series called what is it? It's like something Hearts and Tommy Guns, Troubled Hearts and Tommy Guns, or something like that. I'm losing it now, but it's basically the prequels, like issues 1 and 2.
Yeah, and then 3 is an adaptation of the movie.
Yeah, 3 is the movie. Yeah. So it was in the comics, and if you were smart enough to go back, like, you could have read the book before you watched the movie.
Yeah,
so.
I found out about that as I was doing my research, but I was like, I'm not gonna try to search these out to read them. And I get what you're saying. I don't agree with that because, again, they were made for the movie. Did you see who wrote them?
Yes. I'm not.
Yeah, so they were written by Max Allan Collins, who's the guy who wrote Road to Perdition.
Yeah, the whole thing is so weird. True Hearts and Tommy Guns was the name of the run. It's so weird.
But do you think we're going to get anything else Dick Tracy, or are we going to have to wait for Warren Beatty to die?
Well, I mean, this gets into some weird stuff, like legal stuff, but does his estate maintain the rights when he does die? Like that, I don't know. Do we want another Dick Tracy property? I think is the question.
So that's what I wanted to get into. So could I, and this is going to kind of get into final decision here. I think that Dick Tracy, this movie, is probably one of the best comic book adaptations because it is dead on a live action comic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now,
you could then argue that Frank Miller would then do it in 300 and Sin City, but it's not the same to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Frank Miller is very, and this is not a knock on Frank Miller. Please, like, don't misunderstand me. But he clearly is massively influenced by Dick Tracy. Maybe not the 1990 movie.
No, but
per se,
all those noir comics.
Sin City,
yeah,
come on,
sure.
Sin City is clearly a product of the Frank Millerization of that.
But what I'm talking about with the movies is 300 and Sin City.
Yeah.
They were shot to mimic the comic.
Right.
So scenes
panel for panel,
yes.
Which makes those movies feel forced in terms of their look.
Whereas this one
doesn't. This one doesn't,
Yeah,
and yet it
is
is so true to the comics. So
I was actually going to bring up, for the long-time listener, because I haven't been on in a while, for the long-time listener, me and Tim did an episode about going dark and the idea of realism and everything. And I feel like this is the antithesis to that. Mm-hmm. Like, from the decision to make the character, the villains, very comic strip accurate.
Yes.
Like, to the nitty-gritty. It is the exact opposite. Like, we're going to use the exact same color palette that the comic used. Mm-hmm. We're going to make the characters unapologetically look exactly cartoonish like they did. Mm-hmm. They didn't try to real world anything.
So why did this not work for Shoemaker with the Batman sequels?
Because he tried to change something that was already established. in a franchise.
Because
That's my thought.
yeah, because Schumacher went to the bright colors and the, you know, off
Yeah,
the wall.
he was making sequels off of what started as more of a dark.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with, like, Tim Burton cast a very specific vision.
Yes. Yeah.
And then if you're going to deviate from that, you have to stay with the core of it at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of were like, nope, we're going to do our own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's two very different visions. And so had he made his Batman movies first, maybe, but there's sequels to the Burton Batman.
Or if it was like what we call now a reboot of rebooting that character, then it would have been different because it would have been his vision instead of saying, oh, well, you didn't stay with what the original, Tim Burton's original vision
which of course we know happens.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all kind of revere the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's obviously very different than Burton's vision.
Mm-hmm.
So can we see something like Dick Tracy happen again? Now that we have this dark and gritty or more realistic superhero, like they do with Marvel. Marvel's not so much dark and gritty, but they try to make things as more grounded, even with the fantasy elements and then DC. I mean, DC's about to get this big reboot. So do we see James Gunn going a little bit more colorful and bright?
Well, you got to look at his Suicide Squad that he did was very bright. Like he was trying to bring a lot of color to it. Now it's not a kid friendly movie at all. It's not. And it's not a bright I wouldn't call it a fun movie, but he was trying to brighten up that look. But I agree with Chad. I think it would be a gamble, but I think it'd be a good gamble to do that. To say let's do something that's totally different. Let's not try to do what everybody else is doing, and let's make a more noir. A bright color, stay with the comic, and do it that way. And I'm kind of basing that off of, and I hate to say it that way because it's like, well, see what they did with, Everything Everywhere All at Once that won the Oscars this year was such a different movie, and I did watch it and it's very weird, and I don't think it earned some of the awards that it earned, but they did kind of do what people said couldn't be done, and the gamble paid off for them, and it made an interesting movie that's it's watchable, and obviously it kind of divided audiences, which is typical, but it was a gamble that worked. So
I'm just thinking about again, I'm with me being the Superman guy, I'm thinking about you had the Superman 78, which stayed bright, colorful. His suit was the blue, red, the yellows all popped. Even Lex Luthor was usually dressed very colorful. And so you had all of that. Then Batman 89 comes out. You get this much darker version of Batman that I know Frank Miller had kind of already established in the comics some. But, solid black suit pretty much with the yellow emblem. Now we get into the Marvel Cinematic Universe where things are a little bit more realistic. Yes, there's still the color, but it's almost... I would say that early MCU was a little bit more colorful than current MCU is.
I would agree with that statement, yeah.
And I could almost just use the Captain America suit as my meter there.
Right.
You just follow the Captain America suit throughout the different movies. But then you've got the DCEU, in which I know Snyder with his kind of dark tone and all that, but they took those suits, Aquaman suit, Wonder Woman suit, and Superman suit, and they had to match the color palette of the movie. And so everything's more subtle, more toned down. Does James Gunn, when he does Superman Legacy, does he go back to a brighter, colorful suit?
I think he will. I think James Gunn wants to do that. That's my personal opinion. I mean, I haven't talked to him lately to know for sure. But...
Because, they kind of did that with the Flash television show. The Flash television show comes in, and they make it a little bit more realistic. Then as the popularity grew, they matched a little bit more in tone with Arrow. They made Arrow have more of a greener suit than he originally had, until eventually on Flash they just went full comic book. Like he got the yellow boots, he got the not necessarily looking all techie suit,
right?
Looking more like the red and one piece suit, and so and then you got Shazam. I mean, Shazam kept with more of the lighter tone and the almost brighter colors. So we're kind of getting into a little mini one shot.
I was about
here.
to say to wrangle it back to your original question, like, could you make Dick Tracy again? I don't know. I'm sure that there are creatives that could do something that I'm not currently thinking of, but it'd really have to be out of the box, because it's a very flawed movie, as we have mocked it and made fun of certain parts already, but it's very memorable for a reason. I mean, it's an incredible, we've already went through all that, incredibly well made movie. It's very original for the reasons that we're listing, and I kind of don't know that you could just recreate that. And it's very much a movie of a time.
That's true.
There's no Warren Beatty today. There's nobody who can call all of his
well, there is. He
buddies.
just played Dick Tracy a few months ago.
Holy cow. Yeah, so unless he decides to come out of retirement. But, I mean, that era of Hollywood is totally different.
Yeah.
He can't just call the equivalent Al Pacino, which I don't think there is one of, by the way,
right?
And be like, hey, I've got a crazy idea. Like, let's do this. You know what I mean? Like, those things. They even talk about how a much newer movie, like of our generation, Ocean's 11 had kind of the same problem. This giant, crazy cast that like nobody could have afforded. If you paid them what they're worth, kind of stuff. Like, that movie couldn't be made today because of the way that agents have changed things and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I think this is just kind of one of those weird, like, standalone legendary things that will just remain on its own. And I kind of wonder, and this is completely just me trying to get in Warren Beatty's head, but I wonder if that's not why he retains the rights.
So that there won't be a sequel.
He just doesn't want to see somebody
come and do something.
Rip it off and ruin it.
Right.
Yeah. That was kind of my thought as well when I asked that original question. Was that's my thought, is that he wants this 90s Dick Tracy to be Dick Tracy at least as long as he's alive.
He's alive,
yeah.
So we're kind of already getting into this, so let's just go ahead and get into our final decisions. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. And since, Tim, you were about to speak, I will let you go first, and I'm sure your thoughts that you were about to share tie into your decision here.
Well, all I was going to say was, I think when you asked could Dick Tracy be, or could a sequel be made, I was saying a reboot, and I'm thinking the character of Dick Tracy, the story, you could make a similar story. To Chad's point, you can't. Yeah, you're not going to be able to recreate this movie, which most reboots don't, and that's why they usually fail.
Sure.
But the challenge of that is he was not very well known in the 90s when it came out, and he's definitely not well known now. I mean, it's not even comic strips aren't even something that people even much read anymore. So it would be a totally kind of rebranding effort, and just it'd almost be like a brand new character for a whole new generation. And could you even set it in the 40s, or are you taking today's generation too far back in the past where they would have any kind of connection whatsoever? So I was going to say there. As far as bag it, stack it, and trade it, I would have to say that I would bag this one. And that's just because, like we kind of talked about, I think does it have its flaws? Yes, it does. But it's nostalgic for a reason. It's of its time. It's very, very rewatchable, even with all its flaws. But I think it for us to come back and still want to talk about it and have good things to say about it as much as the bad things to say about it, I think it's worthy of that honor.
Chad?
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from on the bag it, and this is very ethereal theory, whatever you want to call it, but I would say it's a stack it, in the best kind of way. Like, this is one that I just want to show everybody and be like, this is bonkers. Have you seen this? And just, you know what I mean? Like, it's not something that I cherish in that sense. Like, this is one of a kind, and, you know, that sort of thing. It's just like, and to be fair, it kind of is. Like, you could make that argument too. It is very one of a kind, but it's something that you just want to be like, dude, have you heard of this? This movie is crazy. Like, and just show it off. So it's a stack it in the best kind of way, in my opinion.
I'm right there with you. That was, I weighed, do I want to say bag it? But I went with stack it as well. And I'm kind of in the same boat that Chad just talked about. It's a great movie. And I would recommend this movie for anyone. As I said a few minutes ago, I think it's one of the best adaptations of a comic. But I don't think about this movie that much. I don't reach for it when I'm planning out a movie night to tell you actually this other thing. So I have started I'm a big movie buff, as both the guys know. Not just superhero stuff, but I'm a huge movie buff.
You don't say.
And I've got all of my 2,000-3,000 movies in a room, all in these shelves. But I decided to take a shelf and make it just my superhero, my comic book movies, so that I would be able to get to those really quick for the sake of the podcast. Well, when I went to grab Dick Tracy, I discovered I never pulled it. It was still in my general collection. When I was pulling all of my comic book adaptations, I pulled Brenda Starr, and I forgot to pull Dick Tracy. It was still in my general collection. So again, it's not one that I really think about.
Yeah.
I will also point this out, and I know Chad will probably disagree with me and have something to say. I didn't like that there was no background stories for anyone. I know Chad has said before he's good with, he doesn't need everybody's origin. And I'm not saying I wanted everybody's origin. I was fine with Tracy being an established character. And I mean, you could maybe argue that Junior gets a origin story in this, but I didn't give a crap.
Yeah.
So I mean, give me a little bit more of this being Big Boy's origin story, or do one of the other characters. Let it be Flat Top, and maybe they could have used it as Flat Top being set up to be the main villain if there was a sequel. You know, give me something more, because it wasn't just how flat Warren Beatty was. To me, the story is a little flat. And so that's what holds me to that stack it. Again, I agree with Chad. It's a high tier stack it, because I am going to, at anyone who's, Bethany had never seen it.
Oh, wow.
I discovered, yeah. So I was telling her, I was like, I got to watch Dick Tracy. And I was just planning on watching it by myself. And I started talking to Bethany about a couple of things, and she just looks at me. She goes, I've never seen it. I was like, you've never seen Dick Tracy? And so we watched it together. Again, the whole family was sitting in the room as we watched it. But I could tell, like, Bethany didn't get all that interested in it, because it is such a flat story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with you. It has to do one of two things. It needs to either have some origin so that you buy into the characters, or it needs to build towards something happening that you get invested in the characters.
Yes.
So you got to go one of two ways. You either have to give me Dick Tracy's origin so I understand why he's passionate about doing what he's doing, or just to rip off what you were saying, you have to build Flat Top up and keep him alive at the end, so that I'm knowing that I'm going somewhere else.
Because that's my thing about the sequel is, what do you do in a sequel when you've killed everybody?
Yeah, I don't see a sequel plan out of this movie. You know, he said he wanted to make sequels, but I was like, I'm with you. There's no story to continue.
Yeah, they wanted this to be a franchise.
Yeah, the love triangle is done.
Right.
Like, you've resolved that. You've resolved the kid. Like, he's just part of the family now. He's not going anywhere.
Right.
You've killed all the villains. Like, so it's just all wrapped up.
Except Mumbles. Like I said, Mumbles, as far as we know, is just in police custody.
There it is. Dick Tracy
Is he actually a bad guy, or is he just like their mascot and was like, hey, because he never does
Well, he becomes their
anything.
informant, is what essentially happens. He becomes their informant.
But
yeah, something.
No, I agree.
There needed to be something because there is nothing, and that's the thing. This movie, you watch it, and then you just go, okay, that's it. Like you don't, like you're saying, you don't get that feel afterwards of, I want to know what happens next, or I want to see more of this, or. And again, I know, Tim, you said rewatchable. Yes, I could rewatch it, but I'm not going to go out of my way to watch it.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you guys, choice at all. I mean, it was borderline for me, and I think in the last moment I was like, I'll just, because we have kind of, I would say we've crapped on it, but we've talked about its flaws, but we've also talked about we've also talked
we've
about
been very critical.
We've also talked about the things of it that are very well, and I think coming off thinking about a sequel and like Chad saying, it's very much a movie of its time. It is kind of stamped in a nostalgic place for me, so that I think that kind of overrides some of that of why I would bag it.
And that was part of. I had to push back the nostalgia part of it. Because again, I was a huge Dick Tracy fan.
Me too.
I wanted the hat and the jacket and the watch. When I got my first Apple Watch, that's immediately what I thought about.
Oh yeah.
Was this Dick Tracy? I think
about it now when I use it. Yeah. So,
I can talk to
We made
people.
them out of cardboard when I was a kid. Like we would cut out Dick Tracy watches and play with outside.
And there's a lot to this. I actually put this in my notes. We didn't bring it up, but I'll bring it up now. Martin Cooper, who was, main mind behind the invention of wireless technology and cell phones, he has said that it was that watch that inspired him to do what he eventually did. The watch.
Take that, Star Trek.
Yeah.
The watch was introduced January 13th, 1946, and then it even got a screen, a TV screen added to it in the 60s.
A two-way TV screen.
Yeah. There, your original Zoom call right there. So.
And we've come full.
There we go. All right. Well, let's wrap it up for this. We're just going to go ahead. This is going to be a longer episode, but that's what happens when you get the three of us together, and we're talking about a movie that we do love.
Yes.
We're gonna make that clear. We do love this movie, but like Chad has said from the beginning, it's bonkers, and so there's a lot that we could pick through from a critical perspective, but thanks everybody for joining us. Rate and review the show. We always appreciate that. And I'm just going to go ahead and end it now. For today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Well, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.